What we've seen the last few days is nothing less than the final verdict on an economic philosophy that has completely failed. And I am running for President of the United States because the dream of the American people must not be endangered anymore.
Welcome back to Hardball. David Brooks is the latest in a string of conservative columnists to criticize Sarah Palin's inexperience. He wrote in today's New York Times, quote, Sarah Palin has many virtues. If you wanted someone to destroy a corrupt establishment, she'd be your woman. But the constructive act of governance is another matter. She has not been engaged in national issues, does not have a repertoire of historic patterns, and like President Bush, she seems to compensate for her lack of experience with brashness and excessive decisiveness. Why are conservative columnists knocking Palin? And does this pose a problem for McCain? Tucker Carlson is a conservative columnist, as well as a colleague here, an MSNBC senior campaign correspondent. And Democratic strategist Paul Begala is author of the new book, Third Term. Paul, I'm stacking them up here. Krauthammer, who's a neoconservative, obviously very strong on foreign policy. George Will, sort of an all-round intellectual. But Dare is a true intellectual yourself. Third term, why George Bush? What's the subtitle of that, Paul?
Why George W. Bush loves John McCain.
Okay, let me ask you, why, before we get to your book, which we want to talk about, why are the intellectuals in the Republican Party turning on their young?
Yeah, you know, I wonder, I actually don't believe it's a vast right-wing conspiracy to aid Senator McCain and Governor Palin, but I think that's the effect. You know, I've said to the Democrats from the beginning of this thing that the way to talk about Palin is only how she reflects on John McCain. By which I mean, remind voters that John McCain is 72 years old, he's had cancer 4 times, and when it's time to pick the vice president who might have to succeed him, God forbid something happens, what does he do? He goes, God, what was her name? I met her once. One meeting and a 15-minute phone call, and he offers potentially supreme executive authority to her. In other words, define McCain. I think it's been a rabbit trail for the Democrats, chasing after Sarah Palin. I wouldn't do it. I would only use it as a vehicle to attack John McCain. But I would use everything as a vehicle to attack John McCain because he's a candidate.
Tucker, you're harder to figure on this.
Well, I mean, I think it's a sign of intellectual honesty that people who support McCain are calling into question his judgment in picking Sarah Palin. I'm not attacking Sarah Palin. Well, I mean, politically it was brilliant, by the way. Everybody I know and conservatives, oh, who is this person? This is a disaster, and it turned out to be more effective than any vice presidential pick, certainly in my lifetime. But here's the problem with attacking Sarah Palin. One, nobody cares about experience. Nobody. The Democratic Party just nominated a guy who has no experience. I'm not attacking him. He just doesn't. And nobody cares. People don't want experience. They want to be inspired.
One of the major parties.
Well, that's it. I'm not taking that away from him. I'm just saying experience didn't enter into it, except to the extent that a lack of experience helped him. Okay? And second, they attack Sarah Palin's lack of experience. It brings up his lack of experience. I just think it's a tough argument to make.
The vice president of the Constitution has only 2 jobs: to preside over the U.S. Senate and to replace the president if necessary.
Yeah.
For which is she qualified?
Well, presumably, Senator McCain feels she is qualified to be president. I mean, you have to think he does, and he's making that case. I mean, you know, it's hard to argue she's the most qualified person. She's not. But obviously the American people, and this may reflect poorly on our country or not, it's up to you to judge, aren't on the market for someone with the most experience. They want to be inspired and entertained.
Let me ask you, Paul, because I know your politics, but is this like a Clarence Thomas where they wanted to pick an African-American for the Supreme Court, so they picked the kind they wanted, which is, in this case, a guy who was very conservative, who hewed to the sort of the line of the conservative court. They have a person here who's apparently, to some extent, in terms of foreign policy, tabula rasa, someone they can fill up with all this neoconservative thinking, including vocabulary, apparently based upon her performance with Charlie Gibson. Is that what they wanted, just sort of a vessel to sell and carry their product, rather than someone with independent thinking on foreign policy?
Well, I think clearly she hasn't had any independent thinking on foreign policy. That's certainly impressive. And I know she can see Alaska, or Alaska can see Russia, or she can see something from somewhere. I don't care. You know, I mean, I think that it's not even so much experience, though. It is, again, what it says about John McCain. Charlie Gibson, now, who you just mentioned, has spent more time rigorously interviewing Sarah Palin for the job of vice president than John McCain ever did. And I think the way for Democrats to talk about this is to indict McCain. His central appeal is character, and by golly, when he was in that POW camp, he showed real heroism and suffering and service and sacrifice and honor. But as a politician in this election, he has shown nothing but dishonor, and I think this has brought dishonor to the McCain
dishonor
name.
Dishonor is a strong word. Could it be he just didn't like Romney? He thought Palin was too boring, and he just said, okay, I can't pick the guy I want to pick, which is Lieberman, or I want to pick Tom Ridge. I can't pick somebody I respect, so I'm going to pick somebody who's going to help me politically. What else is new in politics?
Well, but if you can't stand up to your own political party, how are you going to stand up to Putin? You know, I mean, he did want Joe Lieberman. Good for him. He did want Tom Ridge, and I think this is sort of a fit of pique. It was impetuous and impulsive, and I just think it does. Well, that combined with the lies he's telling the campaign really does. It discredits the McCain.
Speaking of neoconservatives, here's a smart one. Charles Krauthammer said in the Washington Post, quote, "The choice of Palin remains deeply problematic. The vice president's only constitutional duty of any significance is to become president at a moment's notice. Palin is not ready, nor is Obama. But with Palin, the case against Obama evaporates."
They weren't going to make that case anyway. Look, I think Charles Krauthammer is a very smart, very deeply principled man.
He is principled.
But that case was not going to be made by the McCain people. As my pal, longtime friend Paul Begala always says, a hurt dog barks. And you can see it in the response to Sarah Palin.
Okay, enough psychobabble. Let's go to George Will. George Will said, another guy who is not a neoconservative, he's a paleoconservative. He's closer to Buchanan. No, not too close, but somewhere in the middle. Quote, "The man who would be the oldest to embark on a first presidential term has chosen as his possible successor a person of," I love this word, "negligible experience. Any cook can run the state," said Lenin, who was wrong about that, too. He brings in Lenin to make his case, Tucker.
But how can you argue? Look, I actually, in my heart, I'll be honest with you, I agree. I do agree. It's a serious job. It needs a serious person of great experience. I would have liked to have seen Chris Dodd get the Democratic nomination. But how can a person simultaneously argue that Sarah Palin is unqualified to be vice president and then support Barack Obama? You can't.
Okay,
you can't. It's a rhetorical trap.
While you're in this moment of greatness, this moment of honest greatness, is Carly Fiorina right that none of these candidates for president or vice president has the equipment to run any single American company?
Well, I think the standards for running a large American company are so much higher than the standards for running a government.
But
they are. You don't get a pass.
Cheney ran, Halliburton, Rumsfeld ran some big corporation.
No, I mean, look, whatever. I mean,
I'm saying that they've shown some capability in this area. Go ahead. Your thought, Paul. I've never heard a chief surrogate, and she's been everywhere on television, certainly on cable, selling this guy to say, yeah, but of course he couldn't do my job.
Yeah, you know, this is an admission against interest. The more that Carly Fiorina is out there, the better the Democrats do, because she's an idiot. She took Hewlett-Packard's stock price down. Well, let me make the case. She took Hewlett-Packard's stock price down something like 60%, fired 18,000 people. She said, "I only regret I hadn't fired more people faster." She sold computers to the Iranian regime, the terrorists in Iran, and she says that even McCain or Barack or Biden or Palin are unqualified to do her job. She was unqualified to do her job. She's a disaster for the Republicans.
By the way, they lost 26,000 new jobs today at Hewlett-Packard.
Wait a second. She's an idiot? I mean, I don't know. I've talked to Carly Fiorina.
She's incompetent.
She seem an idiot to me.
No, that's right.
Actually,
idiot's the wrong word, Tucker. She's an incompetent. She's plainly incompetent.
In that position. I just think it's very strange, and I do think by midnight tonight, I don't know anything about running corporations, but I do know something about these campaigns. By midnight tonight, she'll take that back.
Oh, but wait a second. What if she'd said, "Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is a person who knows nothing about the computer business. Oh, she's qualified." I mean, she's just being honest. Of course she's not qualified to run it, and neither am I. It doesn't make me an incompetent.
I learned the hard way. Truth is no defense.
Always tell the truth. What the hell?
Neither was.
We're going to get fired anyway. We might as well tell the truth.
Okay.
Neither was Ms. Fiorina qualified to run Hewlett-Packard.
Okay. Tucker Carlson, thank you, and Paul Begala. Up next.